I heard my own voice screaming from the canyon, and I wasn't even yelling. I had been hiking alone in the Grand Canyon for most of the afternoon, aiming to reach a secluded overlook before sunset. There is something about the canyon's vast emptiness that always drew me in a mixture of awe and fear, a place where the earth seemed to swallow sound and time alike. I liked to go alone. It made me feel like I could disappear, even if just for a few hours. The day had been unusually quiet. Birds were scarce. The wind barely rustled the sparse junipers clinging to the cliffs. The sun hung low in the sky, painting the canyon walls a deep, burning orange, shadows stretching long across the trail. I passed a familiar bend and noticed how empty everything felt. Too empty. I chalked it up to the isolation. The canyon had a way of amplifying your imagination. As I neared a small plateau overlooking a drop that seemed to go on forever, I paused to catch my breath and take in the view. I called out casually, "Hello," just to hear the echo bounce back. The sound was normal, my voice carried off the cliffs, then returned, soft and distorted, as it always did. Then it happened. A scream. It wasn't mine. Or maybe it was. High-pitched, raw, desperate, the scream rolled up from the depths of the canyon like it had been hiding there for centuries, and yet it perfectly mirrored my own voice. I froze, my stomach knotting. I hadn't screamed. Not a sound had left my throat. I swallowed hard and called out again. "Hello?" The echo came back, screaming again. This time it sounded closer, like someone or something was standing just below the edge, waiting. My heart thudded in my chest. I stepped back from the cliff, gripping my hiking poles for comfort. The air felt suddenly heavy, cold in spite of the lingering sun. I tried to convince myself it was just an echo behaving strangely, maybe a trick of the canyon walls. But the sound it was too precise to. Urgent. I started walking, trying to put distance between myself and the scream. Every step I took, though, the sound seemed to follow. Not just in the echoes off the rock, but beneath them. Like the canyon itself had learned my voice and was mocking me. I stopped, turned around, trying to see what could be making the noise. Nothing. Just the empty expanse of rock and shadow stretching hundreds of feet down. The sun sank faster than I expected, and twilight began to settle over the cliffs. Shadows pooled in the crevices, hiding the jagged edges of the rocks. I forced myself to keep moving, telling myself that fear was exaggerating things, that I was imagining voices, maybe some other hiker joking. But the scream came again, right beneath me. My knees nearly buckled. I hadn't spoken, and yet the echo of the scream came up at me. Sharper this time, urgent, almost pleading. I finally reached a narrow path that zigzagged down the canyon, trying to get back to a spot where I knew other hikers would be. My ears strained for any other sound besides that impossible scream. But as I descended, the canyon seemed alive with it, bouncing between the rocks, shifting from one cliff to another, always my voice, always screaming. I stopped at a small outcrop to catch my breath, listening. The air was so still, it almost felt solid. And then I realized this time, the scream was different, not just an echo. It sounded right next to me, beneath the rocks I was standing on. My eyes darted around, searching for a ledge, a crevice, some logical explanation. There was nothing. Nothing but rock and shadow. Panic clawed at me. I wanted to run, but my legs felt heavy, rooted to the ground. I whispered my own name, almost as if calling out to reassure myself. The canyon answered immediately, screaming it back at me. It wasn't me this time. It was coming from somewhere below, but precise, as if someone was inside me, screaming through my own voice. I bolted. I didn't stop until I reached the parking area, my flashlight shaking in my hands, sweat stinging my eyes. There were people there, but I couldn't speak at first. Every time I tried, my voice cracked, echoing in my own skull, like it had been transformed by whatever had haunted me in the canyon. I told them I'd gotten lost, maybe stumbled on a trick of the acoustics, but the panic in my chest didn't fade. Even now, when I close my eyes, I hear it, the screaming echo. My own voice, screaming for help from somewhere deep below the Grand Canyon, where no one should be. And the worst part? I know it's still down there, waiting, echoing, because the sound of my own voice, screaming, wasn't supposed to come from the canyon, but it did. When I unzipped the tent that morning, I realized we hadn't been alone, and whatever was out there had been watching us all night. We had driven for hours to reach the north rim of the Grand Canyon, craving a weekend away from the crowds and the constant buzz of our city lives. My partner, Emily, and I found a quiet campsite tucked into a small plateau near the cliff's edge, a place that felt isolated, almost forgotten. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across the canyon walls, and the wind carried a strange, almost electric stillness. We set up our small tent, pitched it carefully on the flat ground, and settled in for the night. The view was breathtaking. The canyon stretched endlessly before us, the colors shifting from gold to deep purple as the sun vanished. As night fell, we built a small fire, roasted marshmallows, and told stories, laughing until exhaustion pulled us into the tent. The first hours of sleep were normal, heavy, dreamless. Around midnight, though, I woke to a faint noise, a soft scratching sound, like fabric brushing against gravel. My eyes snapped open, and I saw the faint glow of the moon filtering through the tent. At first, I thought it was Emily moving in her sleep, but she was still deep in slumber. The noise stopped. I held my breath. I tried to shrug it off, convincing myself it was the wind, but the feeling of being watched settled in my chest like a stone. I lay there, listening, straining against the dark. The forest around us was quiet, eerily quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your ears. Then I thought I heard it again, a tiny scrape, almost deliberate, coming from outside the tent. I forced myself to drift back to sleep, telling myself I was imagining things. Morning arrived in a cold, pale light, and we stretched and yawned, happy to have survived a chilly night. That's when Emily noticed it. The tent was unzipped. From the outside, we had zipped it tightly before bed, and there was no way either of us could have done it in our sleep without waking. Panic flared in my chest. "Did you hear anything?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Emily shook her head, wide-eyed. I stepped out of the tent and froze. Fresh footprints circled the tent. They were human, bare, maybe a size smaller than mine, and their pattern didn't make sense. They looped around us like someone had been stalking the tent, watching us all night. I swallowed hard. My throat felt dry. The trail continued toward the edge of the cliff. I followed it, my heart hammering in my chest. The prince stopped abruptly, right at the precipice. It was as if whoever had been here had just vanished into the thin air above the canyon. The thought made my stomach lurch. I scanned the rim, the steep drop disappearing into shadow, and for a moment, I thought I saw a figure flicker across the distant rocks. But when I blinked, it was gone. Emily grabbed my arm, whispering that we should leave. I nodded, but a part of me wanted to understand what had been out there. There was no one in the campsite, no discarded trash, no sign of a struggle. Just the prince, the unzipped tent, and the oppressive feeling that we had been watched the entire night. We packed up quickly, keeping our eyes on the canyon rim. The forest seemed alive, shadows shifting in ways that didn't match the trees or the rocks. Every crack of a branch, every rustle in the underbrush made me flinch. I wanted to believe it was an animal, maybe a hiker passing through without leaving a campsite, but nothing about it felt natural. Halfway down the trail to the parking area, I realized something even worse, the footprints. They weren't gone. We hadn't seen them continue beyond the cliff edge because there was no way to see. But in my mind, they were still there, circling, watching, waiting for us to leave. At the car, we didn't speak much. The silence between us was thick, heavy with the memory of the night. I kept thinking about the tent, about how carefully we had zipped it before sleep. Whoever or whatever had been out there had been patient, calculating, watching, and it hadn't needed to touch us to make us feel completely exposed. I've tried to rationalize it over the years. Maybe a wild animal, maybe someone sneaking around for a thrill, maybe the isolation playing tricks on our minds. But I still remember the way the moonlight caught the tent zipper, the way the footprints curved perfectly around us, the way they ended at the edge of the cliff like a warning. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can almost hear the sound of the zipper moving in the dark, inch by inch. Think about that night, how close we came to something we can't explain, how small and vulnerable we were, right on the edge of the canyon, under the watch of whoever or whatever was out there. We never returned to that campsite, and I never sleep near a tent without double-checking the zippers, because some nights I still feel it like someone is circling, just beyond my sight, waiting for the zipper to give way. I thought I was alone at the North Rim, until I saw a shadow staring back at me from the darkness, perfectly still and impossibly close the next moment. I had always been drawn to night photography, and the Grand Canyon's North Rim offered the perfect canvas. I arrived just as twilight was fading, the last orange streaks of sun spilling across the jagged cliffs. The place was deserted, save for the occasional rustle of wind through the scrub pine. I set up my camera near a high overlook, excited to capture the canyon bathed in moonlight, untouched by flashlights or crowds. Night settled in faster than I expected. The temperature dropped sharply, and the wind picked up, whistling across the rim and rattling my tripod. I adjusted the settings, focusing on a distant wall of rock glowing under the moon. That's when I first saw it, a dark silhouette, perfectly upright, standing on a ledge across the canyon. I froze. The figure didn't move. Not a twitch, not a shift in posture. At first, I thought it was another photographer, maybe a ranger, but the shape was unnaturally still. Too perfect, too rigid. I scanned the surrounding rocks. Nothing, just the figure, like a shadow etched into the stone. I lifted my camera to my eye and snapped a photo. When I looked through the viewfinder, my stomach dropped, the figure was gone. I lowered the camera and blinked. It was still there. Must be a trick of the light, I muttered to myself, trying to shake the unease crawling up my spine. The canyon plays tricks at night, I reminded myself. Shadows stretch, rock formations mimic shapes. But even as I repeated this, a pit formed in my stomach. I turned to adjust my tripod, and when I looked back, the figure was closer. Not subtly closer directly across from me, standing on a ledge that should have been hundreds of feet away. My pulse quickened. The canyon between us was vast. There was no path, no ledge that could have allowed someone or something to move that quickly without being seen. The air suddenly felt heavier. The wind that had rattled my tripod moments before died down completely, leaving an oppressive silence. My camera felt like a lifeline, a shield I didn't entirely trust. I raised it again and zoomed in, my hands shaking. The figure was humanoid, tall, featureless, completely black against the moonlit rocks. It didn't blink, didn't breathe, or at least, I couldn't see any motion that suggested life. I wanted to speak, to call out, but my voice wouldn't come. It was a soundless, frozen moment, a trap of instinct and fear. The figure simply watched, as though aware I was seeing it for the first time, and simultaneously, the 100th. I moved back slightly, trying to find something familiar in the canyon to reassure myself. The figure didn't shift, and then, without moving a single muscle, it was closer again. Not a gradual approach, not a trick of perspective. It had teleported, impossibly, to a ledge just a few 100 feet away, its gaze, if it could be called that, fixed on me. The rational part of my mind screamed at me. It couldn't be real. No human could cover that distance unseen. No animal would stand like that. But the instinctual part of me, the one rooted in fear and survival, knew I wasn't imagining it. I stumbled backward, tripping over a root. My camera clattered to the ground, snapping another shot in the fall. I scrambled to pick it up, hands slick with sweat. When I looked back up, the figure was gone again. The canyon was empty, or so it appeared. My ears strained for any sound, my eyes scanning every shadow, but all I could hear was my own rapid breathing and the faint whistle of the wind returning. I didn't stay to investigate. I packed up as quickly as possible, my legs trembling. Every few steps, I dared a glance across the canyon. Nothing. The rim was empty, silent, indifferent. Yet a gnawing sensation told me the figure hadn't left. It had only receded into the shadows, waiting, patient, aware. Back at the trailhead, I reviewed the photos on my camera. The first shot showed a dark silhouette across the canyon, as I had seen. The next frame, the one I had thought the figure had disappeared from, was smeared, blackened, almost as if the image had resisted capturing it. The final photo, taken during my stumble, was horrifying. The figure was there again, impossibly close, its form unnaturally dark and featureless, staring straight at me. I've tried to explain it. Maybe someone playing a prank, a trick of shadows and exposure, something my camera exaggerated. But logic doesn't erase the memory of standing alone on that rim, hearing only the wind, feeling the unblinking awareness of something that shouldn't exist, yet somehow had tracked me across the canyon without leaving a trace. I never returned to that overlook. And even now, when I look at photographs of the North Rim at night, I can't shake the feeling that something is watching from across the rocks, just beyond the reach of my lens, waiting for me to return.